Babs, what kind of America would you like to live in?
I don't really care about America. I think that Americans can sort that out. I'm actually repatriating. I mean, so I have a sort of a worldview that starts from Israel or from the Levant and works outwards from there. I guess I guess in terms of sort of a global things that I would like to see, insofar as I want to see anything take place on a global scale. I'm not really that much of a global thinker. I'm not really someone who thinks. I'm not a humanist so much, or even someone who necessarily thinks along the lines of all of humanity all of the time. But insofar as I do, I guess as a perennialist and a Jew, I wish to see the world become overall more connected to the transcendent, the divine, to God or Godhead, or however you envision that. Less globalism, no sort of capitalist or bureaucratic world order. I think that relatively homogenous nations where traditional indigenous cultures can thrive is a good vision as well. I think that I'm generally, I mean, imperialism and colonialism and war are inevitable and not even necessarily to be feared. But I think that a lot of unnecessary conflict and a lot of loss of beautiful indigenous traditional cultures occurs when you have unnecessary conflict, which often manifests itself in the form of like, let's say, a majority minority dynamic. Things like that always tend to breed conflict, but also larger things like imperial or colonial conflicts can have a similar effect. So I guess those are some of my tenets. Those are just a few, but those are the ones on the top of my head.
Babs, do you think there'll be a Jewish state of Israel in 20 years?
I don't care if there's a Jewish state of Israel, and even if there isn't a Jewish state of Israel, I think that the Jews, we originated in Judea, we originated in Israel. We are our blood, our culture, our religion. We all traces back to the Levant. I mean, you can look at it by several material measures, or you can look at it in sort of a divine way. But I think that there, just as there is a Jewish state, there was a Jewish state in some form or another, intermittently throughout various times in history, going back all the way to the genesis of us as a people when we formed out of the Levant, out of the other Levantine peoples, when our ethnicity sort of congealed and consolidated. I think that tracing back all the way till then, there have been various polities with varying degrees of autonomy, all the way from independent kingdoms to sort of autonomous regions and imperial things, or like little military states that only lasted about like 12 years in the case of Shimon Bar Kokhba's state. I think that it doesn't matter. There'll be a state there at some point in the future. We'll always keep coming back. We're tied to this land. It doesn't really matter what form the state takes or what iteration it is.
Okay, Babs, so to be clear, you are moving to a land, to a nation state, that you don't care whether that nation state that you're moving to survives or not.
Well, I'm not moving to Israel for the Israeli government. I couldn't care less about the Israeli government. It's a liberal democratic system that flies in the face of our indigenous values and customs. It's like a colonial Western Enlightenment system. Like why should I care about the Israeli government? I care about the Jewish people, the Hebrew people, and concentrically radiating out from that, I also care about other Middle Eastern people. I also care about all of humanity. I mean, it's like I don't know. Care about.
So you'd be fine. The Jewish state's destroyed. I mean, hundreds of thousands of Jews would die in the process. Jewish holy sites would be turned into urinals like they used to be. Jews would have severely restricted freedom. They would be humiliated and persecuted, and that's all a matter of indifference.
No, that's implying that the present Israeli state is in some manner overtaken by Arabs. Whereas I don't think that that's necessarily the case. Why wouldn't it necessarily, let's say, be split into two administrative regions, or be overtaken by a subsequent Jewish state, or some other sort of form of polity? I think that Israel being taken over by Arabs is just one vision of how things could go in terms of the Israeli government forming into a different type of system of governance.
If there's no longer a Jewish state of Israel, then there will only be an Arab state. There's no other possibility. You think there's going to be a Japanese state?
Well, this is barely a Jewish state. This is it's like a secular Sivnat state. It's not even a Hebrew or a Jewish state, really. But I mean, why couldn't it it could be replaced with a hyper traditionalist society with, and I know Messiah and Waddle, but it could be replaced with a hyper traditionalist society that was very dynamically organized with, I don't know, a monarch or something like that, or it could be replaced by a set of communes. And all of these things could take place under the system wherein the indigenous Hebrew land remains majority Hebrew. You see what I'm saying, right? Like, it doesn't. I'm not talking about a demographic displacement. I'm simply talking about a change in the system of governance. I don't particularly care about this modern state of Israel, just like how let's say a German nationalist of sorts has no particular allegiance to the state of Germany. They have an allegiance to their people, to their ancestral culture. But I think that these bureaucratic, democratic Enlightenment states, they don't speak for me. I mean, it's just all a mess, to be honest. And I'd rather have another system of organization. There are several that I can think of.
If there was a Jewish state during World War II, 6 million Jews wouldn't have gone up chimneys. So to me, the lives of millions of Jews is a matter of importance. So Jews, there'd probably be half as many Jews in the world today if there was not the Jewish state of Israel. But that's a matter of indifference to you?
No, it isn't, because regardless of whether it's this iteration of Israel, it could have been a million other types of iterations of Israel. It could have been founded by different people, and it could have been called Judea. It could have been called it could have been called the Jewish Mandate of Palestine. It could have been called a million other things. Could have been a series of communes. It could have been an actual state with a very like this Enlightenment sort of Westphalia style nation state. It could be a kingdom, is what I'm saying. It could be a whole series of different things. The point is that it's a polity in our indigenous land wherein we are the majority. That's all that matters. I don't have any allegiance to this modern state of Israel. I don't care about Netanyahu. I don't care about the Knesset, a parliament, a system that has nothing to do with Jews. This is just some Enlightenment gobbledygook that we get because we fetishize the West and we think that to be Western is to be advanced. All these Ashkenazi Jews just love, oh, the West is great. The West is the best. We need to have all this Western stuff and this Western aesthetic, the super, and like it's just goofy. No, I don't think an Enlightenment style state is something that I have allegiance to. I mean, yes, I have allegiance to it insofar as it is the Hebrew state, it is the Jewish state, but there are a million styles of governments that I prefer, styles of governance that I would prefer, and a million styles of societal organization that I would prefer to this. I only have the allegiance exists to my people, and I wish to see my people remain an autonomous majority in our indigenous lands. But has nothing to do. Yeah.
All I said was a Jewish state. I said nothing about the type of government. All I said was a Jewish state.
Yes, but a state implies a Westphalian style nation state. I simply support my nation. I am a nationalist in the purest sense. I don't care about the idea of modern Westphalian Enlightenment style nation states. I don't care if it's a kingdom. Don't care if it's a set of communes. I prefer a kingdom, but I think that God already gave us a king, and whatever. But
wow. Brindlefly, do you have a reaction?
Well, at first I didn't really understand where Babs was coming from with, he called it a CivNat state, but, you need to be Jewish to immigrate, which seems at least religio-nationalist or ethno-nationalist, however you look at it. But I do agree with him that, look, I support the United States insofar as like this is where I grew up. I mean, I will suffer the same fate. Like if we go to war with a foreign power, like that foreign power won't care whether I support the government or not when they're dropping bombs on my city. But at the same time, like I'm not necessarily attached to the republic the way it's constructed either.